Politics. It's a subject that gets pretty tricky in our modern American social culture. We all have our own opinions, some that clash a lot. But political preference aside, have you been following our political candidates at all? If not, you're still in for a treat. I have some really compelling research that is sure to knock your socks off. But before we start, I'd like to point out that COVID 19 has given us an extremely unique opportunity to present the research as an infographic. So hold on tight. We're going to make a quick switch. Now that we're in the infographic, let's begin. Over the past stretch of time, I've been working on research to prove the idea that Democratic rhetoric has shifted from that of policy and reform to more personal issues. I kicked it off with some research questions to help guide my research and narrow it down into a focus for my conclusion. The first question was, has the focus of Democratic political speeches changed from discussing platform and issues to personal issues? And the second question was, has there been an increase or decrease of pathos used in speeches? Before we can go ahead with the process, it's important that I clear up and educate on some of the following topics. For those who don't know, the Democratic Party is an American political party that has roots that reach all the way back into 1792, where their ideals were much different than the party that we have today. During their establishment, they were opposed by the Federalists. They originally supported and tolerated slavery and anti-civil rights to ensure their Southern vote. As the 20th century rolled around, they started to realign their values and support things like civil rights, minorities, government economic intervention, and progressive reform. All of this is important to remember because they were the group of interest for the research that was being done. As for their speeches, Democrats have a place where they hold their speeches in preparation for becoming the prime candidate. This place is known as the Democratic National Convention, DNC for short. This series of sub-conventions hosts an array of political figures who include, but are not limited to, Democratic candidates and their audience. The DNC was established in 1832 by the U.S. Democratic Party for the sole purpose of nominating a Democratic candidate. The location differs every convention, as usually is decided closer to time. It's also apparent with the time frame as well, because historically it's taken place between April and August. Like they did in the past, the Democrats and their ideals are ever moving to suit the needs and expectations of the voters who they seek to appeal to. This is where the inspiration for my research ideas came into action. I came in with some preliminary expectations. Keep in mind, that doesn't always mean bias. That might seem unfair, but I also walked towards research with an open mind and a hope to be proved wrong, given the topic of the research. That aside, I stayed very neutral throughout. I personally thought, though, that the research was going to point towards the Democratic platform being diluted with endorsement, slander, and personal issues. I was definitely surprised and bummed out by the results. More to get on that later. I started by picking some candidates from different eras of political time to ensure the space given was enough to see some change. For example, I used Bill Clinton and his 1992 speech for my early candidate, and for my neopolitical time candidates, I originally was only going to use Joe Biden, but I decided to add Mike Bloomberg because I wanted the speech to match up with time, since both speeches combined didn't hit the 50 minutes that Clinton talks for. This gave both eras a fair chance when I was trying to analyze them, but we'll get to that in a bit. I obviously had to start with tons of research, not just on the speakers, but on literature too, to support my topic, and have different supplemental pieces to further aid my research. This became increasingly frustrating, but it pays off once you get the golden text. While in research, I found different cases where I wasn't the only one with this thought, but while looking through scholarly articles, no one really had touched up on the exact subject that I wanted. I was to pioneer new research with aid of other already done works. While looking through these articles for supporting themes, it actually helped me to figure out and hone in on the exact method that I wanted to do because I had a rough idea, but I wasn't exactly sure where I was going to go about it. But this further solidified exactly how I wanted to evaluate this. I learned ideas like discourse analysis, thematic factoring and assessment, qualitative evaluation of rhetorical power, all of which was included in my research in one way or another. The method I use is qualitative, so I used some of the previously mentioned approaches to get a good idea of what I was working with. I was extremely driven by the literature that I found. It basically gave me the green light for the entire idea that I had. Alina Lindgren and Ellen Narin had said in their article that rhetoric is everything with communication. It sells words in which can shape the way voters perceive policy. Now, to me, that was extremely helpful because it was exactly what I was trying to look for. Now I didn't feel so crazy about trying to look for these trends through their rhetoric. All three speeches were transcribed and corrected where errors of transcription were made. Following that, two different separate graders went through and graded each speech with a fine-tuned comb, analyzing the speech throughout the video and its transcription. While listening, both graders had a set of highlighting colors attached to different possible themes that could be important to the research. Line by line, the speeches got a very thorough analysis, not once, but twice, just to ensure that every possible chance was given for analysis. The two graders were then combined, after keeping separate to prevent themselves from confounding each other's results. After the combination of sheets, the colors were analyzed and noted for usage and context. This, along with factor of political climate and discourse, further solidified the trends that were emerging out of this qualitative analysis. After finalizing the analysis, rhetorical shifts became very clear. Comparing the coded colors from earlier, it was clear that Bill Clinton, in his 1992 speech, had substantially more talk of policy and reform than his 26-year successors, Biden and Bloomberg. While Clinton mainly focused on policy and peaceful comparison of himself and the administration before his to come, Biden and Bloomberg used over 50% of their speeches to slander the opposing presidential candidate, Donald Trump. Clinton showed structure and rhetorical soundness and relatability that was told through his stories of his past. Biden and Bloomberg both insisted on their party member Hillary Clinton being the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. Although there were many differences between the two generations of politicians, an important commonality was discovered while coding. In their attempts of relatability, both generations used strong statements of patriotism and unity with the universal persuasive words like us, we, and our. They used these to establish common ground with the audiences that they were trying to appeal to. Both generations have very potent uses of pathos, but in the way that they were used were much different. Clinton uses his relatability card through pathos by telling some of his life stories of his mother, his grandfather, and his deceased father, understandably which would touch the hearts of many, especially those who have shared similar experiences with him. Biden and Bloomberg, on the other hand, use pathos in a manner of fallacy called appeal to fear or scare tactic. Through their slander of Donald Trump, they've painted a very bone-chilling picture that would appeal to the audience's emotions by making them believe that Trump was the scary option. After compiling the findings, it's safe to say that Democrats' rhetoric has shifted from progressive policy and reform to that of political issues and slander. The Democratic Party clearly made a big shift in their rhetoric of appeal towards the voters. This shift might later down the line show some sizable ramifications. Pathos, on the other hand, really hasn't changed much besides the way that it's been used. But this begs the question, why did they shift the way that they did? And where might they be in another 26 years? Democrats could be using this excessive slander and relatable appeal to make up for the fact that they don't have the necessary platform to convey, not to mention the media severely twisting what is said. This new approach is more of an entertainment for the voters of today who are ready to be spoon-fed information in like fashion. We as college students seek to learn the truth, so keep your head on straight and keep thinking, because together we can be the next big shift in politics.